John Noe unveils Greater Than We Believe with your host, Stephen King.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. This is Stephen King. I'm your host today. I'm with John Noe. We are bringing you a series called Greater Than We Believe. This is number 9 in our series of videos. This is the second half of the number 8, which we started before. I hope you enjoyed it. It's called My Patmos Experience. This is a very personal story that John is telling. I think you will be fascinated by the story he's told so far. So if you haven't seen that, watch this, but go back and watch the one before it. Meanwhile, we're going to finish John's account of his visit to the island of Patmos and the things that were revealed to him after he prayed to God to give him some sort of a revelation. And I'm just eager to hear the rest of the story. So John, thank you for having us again, and go for it.
All right. For those of you who have not viewed our previous video, please go back and do that, or this won't make much sense to you.
No.
Okay. 6 days after I'd left the cave on the island of Patmos, where John received the book of Revelation, where Jesus gave it to him, touched him,
yes,
and all that kind of stuff. 6 days later, upon landing in Chicago at O'Hare Airport, and after being up for 20 hours, flying home where you can't really sleep that well on airplanes, and transferring through airports and all that kind of stuff, we still faced a 4-hour drive home. But as we were driving out of the whole O'Hare Airport, traffic was backed up on the interstate unbelievably, and we just sat there. And it was awful. And we were delayed probably another hour from getting home because of the traffic problem. And those of you who've ever been around Chicago and the interstates there know what I'm talking about. So we finally got out, and we finally came down to I-65 and turned off of the tri-state there and headed toward Indianapolis. And we looked ahead of us, Stephen, and there ahead of us was this huge cloud bank to the south of us. And it was so dense that Cindy said, it looks like a mountain. And it was still light, by the way.
Sure.
So it looks, but it was about, 5 or 6 o'clock at night, something like that. But it was still light. And we thought, well, that's just really unusual. And so we kept driving. Then we started seeing lightning flashing in this cloud. Lightning flashing, street lightning going this way, cloud to ground lightning going this way. And so we kept driving 70 miles an hour. We never got close to that cloud. And we had to drive 150 miles south from there, to get to Indianapolis. We never caught up with the cloud. It was always ahead of us. And the lightning show got more, as darkness came, got more and more spectacular.
Wow.
And actually it helped keep us awake, because it was like, saying, wow, did you see that one? Look at that.
It's like a fireworks show.
And it helped keep us awake, too, because we've been up for 20 hours and we were tired. And again, it kind of reminded us of the Israelites as God would lead them through the wilderness, by a cloud by day, and what by night?
Fire at night. Yeah.
Fire. Yeah. Well, what do you think lightning is?
Yeah,
what do you think lightning is? Lightning is fire. So we were joking about that. Well, the next morning, we got home. We never got, and by the way, it never rained. We never caught up with the cloud, and it was huge. It looked like it was just, you could almost reach out and touch it. Never got there, never rained. The next morning, I woke up unexpectedly at 6 a.m. because of jet effect. Even though I hadn't slept that much, you jet effect. So I decided to go ahead and go to my Sunday morning men's meeting, which I usually attended on Sunday mornings at the church we were attending. And as usual, we started out by singing 2 praise and worship songs led by one of the men who plays the guitar. And the words of one of the first songs that he sang struck me as rather relevant as we sang. And maybe some of you know this song. O God, you are my God. I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning and will learn to walk in your ways, and step by step you lead me, and I will follow you all of my days. Interesting, I thought, as we sung that song, that's what I had done 6 days ago on the top deck of the cruise ship all by myself at night as we cruised in to that harbor of Patmos. And as we entered into the port, I had sought God early in the morning, even before the rising of the sun. When the song ended, our worship leader rhetorically asked, "Where are all the signs and wonders?" Well, that's what I was still wondering. You know, then he started talking about Gideon in the Old Testament book of Judges. It seems Gideon asked and wondered about this same issue. And what did Gideon do? He asked the angel of the Lord, who was appearing to him, for a sign. I mean, Gideon asked, if, quote, "if now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me." Judges 6:17. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from him. Gideon was as presumptuous as I had been on the island of Patmos. But God gave him a sign, as he requested. See Judges 6:18 and forward, and also see Matthew 12:39. The next morning, on Sunday, our pastor's sermon was on Judges 6. And he talked about Gideon's fear to undertake the task that God had assigned him. And I pondered, was this just another coincidence? And then, Stephen, it hits me. That Sunday afternoon, we returned on Friday, followed the cloud, Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, I decided to look over the book that I had purchased in the parking lot next to the monastery surrounding the cave of St. John, where he was given the book of Revelation. And lo and behold, on this page that shows the picture of the cave that we saw earlier, there's that sign that I saw.
Yeah.
Right? Written in Greek. And here is the English translation.
Oh.
Now, so
the plot thickens.
So our viewers will not think I'm making this up. Here's a translation. Would you please read the translation of this sign, which hangs right above where you enter and exit from the church service, and right next to the opening of the cave?
Okay. It says, "This impressive place is nothing but the house of God, and this is the door to the sky."
And that's when it hit me. The sign, the revelation that God had shown me was not in the cave. It was to be in the sky. In that morning, as we approached, and in perfect alignment, if you will hold this open for me, please. In perfect plane alignment, perfect crescent moon, star right straight above it, cruise ship as we got closer and closer, the Big Dipper angled like this as it was pouring out as we got closer, and I mentioned last time, closer and closer and closer, the hill gets higher in the horizon, and it came and looked like the Big Dipper was touching the top of that hill. Perfect alignment. And what does that say again, if you would read that again while I hold this for our...
I got goosebumps. It says, "This impressive place is nothing but the house of God, and this is the door to the sky."
Wow, I thought. Well, let me continue on with my account so I don't forget anything here. Like a lightning bolt out of a cloud bank.
When did we see that?
That's when it hit me. The revelation I had sought from God did not come in the cave on Patmos as it did with John. It had come in the pre-dawn sky above Patmos. And why should I consider it unusual that God would choose to use signs and symbols in the sky to communicate to me a revelation about a prophetic book filled with signs and symbols? Many times in the Bible, Stephen, God used signs and symbols in the sky. as one of the ways he communicated with us humans. For example, the sun and the moon were created as signs to mark seasons, days and years. Genesis 1. The rainbow was given as a sign of the Noahic covenant. Genesis 9:13. One of the plagues of Egypt was total darkness in the sky for 3 days. And once the sun stood still and the moon stopped. Joshua 10:12 through 14. And then we have Jesus on the cross, and what happened? An eclipse of the sun. And we have Jesus termed as the Son of Righteousness, who will rise with healings in his wings. And he's also termed in Revelation the bright
Morning star.
morning star.
Wow.
Revelation 2:28, 22:16. And Peter's morning star. 2 Peter 1:19. Joel prophesied that God would show wonders in the heavens. And we see that quoted in Acts 2:19 through 20. Jesus said there would be fearful sights and great signs from heaven, Luke 21:11. And lastly, the 1st and 2nd century theologians, Josephus and Tacitus, report great signs in the sky took place leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. So, I ask you, was the perfect alignment, straight line, plane, alignment, was that perfect alignment? Bow to stern, 3 celestial signs, Big Dipper, star, crescent moon. In that pre-dawn morning, as I arrived into the harbor, merely a coincidence. Perhaps. But again, others and I had been praying for 2 months for special revelation from God, a la Ephesians 1:17. So, I once again prayed for wisdom. What does this mean? So let me ask you this. In my account, I call this, what's the probability? If you had been me, Stephen, on the top deck, right here with me, and there was nobody with me.
Okay.
No human being.
Yeah.
But if you'd have been with me, right here, on that top deck of that cruise ship, seeing what I was seeing at that time, and praying for the spirit of wisdom and revelation, and looking, with your antennas way up, and looking, what would you have thought?
It's got to mean something. It's got to be a reason for that happening when it did. There's no coincidence. It couldn't be.
What's the probability that all 7 of the coincidences that I have mentioned all came together exactly, precisely for that moment? Aligned in time, place, and position on planet Earth, especially at that point on planet Earth where Patmos is located, the island of the Revelation. During my visit on Sunday, the Lord's Day, March 26, 2006. What's the probability? Number 1, that my wife and I would be invited to join a preset 11-day tour of Greece and Turkey that would put me on the island of Patmos in the cave of St. John on that particular day. On that particular day, and by the way, we didn't even know about this thing. On that particular day when all this happened. What is the probability that the Big Dipper would be perfectly situated right over the top and pouring down right on top of the cave where the cave was located? What's the probability of a perfectly waning crescent moon being aligned here? And the star right above it. And all this, and straight off the stern of the book and the boat, straight off the stern and straight back this way, 40 to 60 miles away, the country of Turkey, where the 7 churches of the Revelation were located. Straight, perfect alignment. And what's the probability that the time of day that I entered the harbor would be dark, and I'd see this when the previous day it wouldn't have been, and I wouldn't have seen this?
Wow.
if it had been light. And we had no idea the time was going to be changing in Europe at that time, because it was an hour ahead of America. And what's the probability that this sign would be the key
Right there.
that redirects me for the revelation that I've been praying for? From having been in the cave, where the only thing I really got that was kind of shocking was no pictures. But I did get touched.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was no pictures. No pictures. That my revelation would not be in the cave, but it would be in the sky. What are the probabilities? Then what does it mean? Okay, here's my assessment. The more I've reflected on and prayed about what happened that day on Patmos, the more I have gleaned. Below is what I currently think these circumstances, or signs, or symbols, or whatever might have meant. I ask you to judge it, but here's my interpretation. Like the Apostle Paul, who asked those in Jerusalem who he deemed to be leaders in Galatians 2:2, for fear I had or was running my course in vain. So, here's 3 relevant questions I'll bring up. Number 1, was the perfect alignment of these 3 celestial phenomena that I had seen in the sky actually signs and symbols and God's way of communicating a revelation to me? If so, what did they symbolize? And 3, if I did believe this was a revelation, would I allow him to lead me in this way and follow his leading?
Wow.
Sign number 1, the Big Dipper. As we moved in closer and closer to the harbor, it was as if God was pouring, or the Big Dipper was pouring something out on revelation. Long ago, God poured out his revelation to John in the cave. And this symbol to me was that he's still pouring this out in a preterist, idealist fashion.
Ongoing process.
Ongoing process.
I love it. I love it.
Not fulfilled and over.
Right.
Fulfilled and ongoing, a la preterist, idealist. 2, a perfect waning crescent moon. The same width and shape as is featured on the national flag of Turkey. With one exception. The star here is above and not to the side. We'll get to that in a minute. Turkey is the home, as I mentioned, and the original country of the 7 churches of Revelation. Hence, this second sign signifies that the testimony for the churches in Revelation that God poured out, he is still pouring out. Preterist, idealist. The prophetic contents of the book of Revelation are just as relevant today as they were back in that first century time frame, and have been ever since, and will be. A la preterist, idealist. Another possible interpretation, however, that has been mentioned to me is this: is that sign of a sliver of a perfectly waning crescent moon could mean that God's people are only receiving a sliver of the revelation of the book of Revelation's light and knowledge, because most are in the dark about the prophecy, because they're mostly futurizing it,
Right.
or bifurcating it and putting part to the past and part to the future. So most are in the dark about what is God's ultimate pinnacle and climactic and final revelation to humankind in his plan of progressive revelation from Genesis to Revelation. Hence, quote, many of God's people are destroyed by this lack of knowledge because you have rejected this knowledge. Hosea 4:6. They are also missing out on Revelation's 7 promised blessings, because those promised blessings are only given to those people who read, hear, and obey. And if you don't understand what this is,
How can you obey?
you cannot possibly receive the blessings that are the 7 blessings that are promised in the book of Revelation. That's serious stuff.
It is.
The bright morning star. The bright morning star symbolizes none other than Jesus Christ himself. I mean, we've already cited those passages there. As Revelation's first 5 words say, it's the revelation or unveiling of Jesus Christ. It's not the revelation and unveiling of the end of the world or the Antichrist. It's a revelation of Jesus Christ. And the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Revelation 19:10. Moreover, he indeed is above all things. The star was above,
Yep.
not to the side.
Yep.
And this bears repeating, don't you think? Jesus Christ is above all things. And the book of Revelation is revealing the greater Jesus, the ascended, the glorified, exalted Christ.
Greater than we believe.
Greater than we believe. You want some more?
Oh, I love it. Keep going.
Confrontations in front of the monastery. The two. With my guide and with the guy that rudely and
Yes.
interrupted. Because of their erroneous errors about the book of Revelation being a futuristic end of the world and mindset, the Greek Orthodox people, my tour guide, the angry man who so abruptly disagreed and interrupted me, are not receiving the promised blessings of the book of Revelation. Nor are many other Christians for similar reasons. Revelation stipulates, as I mentioned earlier, in both its first chapter and its last chapter, that those blessings are only for those people who read, hear, and that hear means with intended meaning and proper understanding, and obey it all. Revelation 1:3 and 22:7, and those encompass and bookend the entirety of the prophecy. And there's absolutely no justification, Stephen, as we've talked about before in one of our other videos, for bifurcating that book.
Yeah, can't split it up.
Anywhere. No. All right. So this prophecy had to be obeyable, beatable, and keepable. It couldn't be something that hadn't happened yet,
Sure.
as most people are taught. Okay. The sign, one more. The sign on the cave.
Right there.
This one right there. The sign redirected me to the signs and symbols I saw in the pre-dawn sky, as opposed to my expectations for being in the cave. The revelation I had sought, I write here, was given to me via 3 signs in the sky above Patmos, and not in the cave on Patmos. Further confirmations upon my return. Being delayed by an hour or more in heavy traffic and consequently having to follow the cloud bank on the drive home from Chicago redirected me to what I had seen in the sky in Patmos. And the praise song that was sung on Saturday morning reminded me that I had sought God in the pre-dawn hours of that morning of March 6, 2006. And the Gideon comparative in Judges 6, in the pastor's sermon that next day, gave me the confidence that I had not been presumptuous about asking God for a revelation, looking for signs, and traveling all that way to have it happen. The last part of my summary here I call my confirmation and revelation of Revelation. I believe God did speak to me in a fairly dramatic way on that Lord's Day, March 26, 2006, on the island of Patmos, and that I did receive a revelation. This revelation, small r, of Revelation, big R, however, did not change the scholarly understanding that I've evolved into over the past 20-some years, and now 35, or whatever. Rather, it confirmed it. I also believe God is leading me in this preterist ideal direction. 2, bullet, emphasize the blessings of the book of Revelation. 2nd bullet, tell people why they are missing out on these promised blessings of Revelation. 3rd bullet, share, teach, and disseminate this climactic message of the greater Jesus, wherever a door or doors are open. And 4, citing from Judges 6, 14 and 16, to go in the strength you have. Am I not sending you? I will be with you. But you be the judge. And that's a wrap.
Wow. That is amazing. God, I believe from your story that He not only spoke to you, but I think He gave you the wisdom to understand the words He was giving you. I think it was His insight, His Spirit working in your mind to help you to get that realization and then to put this together. That's exciting. That is wonderful. Well, what did you think about that? I would love to see some input on either his website, through email, through comments and replies here on this video. Whatever it takes. John and I together have decided that what we want to do is we want to bring the good news of the kingdom. The gospel is the good news. The gospel is the kingdom. That's what Jesus was promoting. And we have to unlearn some things that's traditions of men and relearn some things which are truth of the Bible. And we want people's input on how we're effective or not. I'd love to get your thoughts on this, and in further future videos, perhaps we can actually comment on some of your thoughts. Meanwhile, please take the time to go back and look at the original 7 videos which are already posted. The one that was prior to this, which is number 8, which was the first half of my Patmos experience. Be prepared. We have more coming. And we just want to do God's will. And we want you to be Bereans. We don't ask you to take anything we say because we say it. We want you to search the Scriptures, pray about the things you hear, and be a Berean. Ask the questions. And meanwhile, we feel privileged to be able to come to you. We thank you for the time you invest in listening to what John has to say. I've mentioned before, and I'll say it one more time, this is just a few of the many books that John has written, and over 30 years' time, they're available on Amazon. I'm not doing this as a commercial, but honestly, there's no way in a 30-minute video I can convince you, or John can convince you of anything. We can whet your appetite and plant some seeds. The fact is, it takes time to get through a very complicated subject and to help you get rid of old thoughts that don't apply and bring up new thoughts. And you have to have a structured way to do that. And I have read this one. I finished it. It's one of my favorite books. But I also have read some other books of his, which we'll talk about later. But I really want to encourage you to take the time to keep reading your Bible daily. That's God's Word. But take some of this and use it as a companion, and just pray to God and ask Him to use His Holy Spirit to influence you to understand what it is God wants you to know. And I hope that what we're doing is a blessing to you. Mm-hmm. Thank you again, John, so much.
Next video.
Next video is what?
We're going to start a countdown.
Oh, cool.
What I'm calling my top 10 list. Now, I did borrow that.
David Letterman's top 10. Except this will be John Noe. Okay.
My top 10 list.
Okay.
Of mistranslation errors of the Bible.
I'm looking forward to that.
Starting with number 10.
Okay.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and number 1.
Great. I look forward to that. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on the next time around. Good night. Good. That's another one in the can.
Well, I hope. Well, that red light's
they're on. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Good.
Man, I really enjoyed that. You know, and I'm glad I didn't know it was in the book, because I probably would have cheated.
Yeah,
I probably would have read.
I didn't want you to.